Hello, and welcome to another episode from Season 6 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're changing things up. We're devoting a whole season to reviewing Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time. In each episode, we'll break down a different movie, talk about how scary it really was, and then update our rankings to prove how much smarter we are than the other people on the internet. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. So I know it's probably a controversial opinion, but I think this is one of the better episodes of Friends.
Oh, yeah? It's a really good one.
I haven't seen that many, but this one was more interesting than most of the others that I'd seen.
There's a lot more action in this one.
Yeah.
Actually, I see nudity in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like they definitely condensed a lot of the tension, the romantic tension between the characters. Like you just kind of got down to business, and then I also like that a lot of them didn't survive.
Yeah. None of them.
Yeah. Spoiler warning. I'm just joking. We don't do that anymore. But yeah. All right. I'm going to introduce this.
Let's do it.
In 2002, Eli Roth released horror comedy Cabin Fever, which he wrote, directed, and produced. The movie follows a group of 5 teens, maybe, who vacation at a cabin in the woods but are quickly forced to confront a ravenous disease, as well as a small town full of strange characters. Despite getting very mixed reviews, this film brought in over $30 million at the box office after being made on a budget of under $2 million. The film currently has 2 sequels, as well as a 2016 remake. You can rent the original on Amazon Prime Video.
Perfect. Or you can watch it for free if you subscribe to Cinemax for free for 7 days.
Nice.
Yep.
Although, spoiler warning, I probably wouldn't recommend it.
Like subscribing or watching it?
Well, it's not worth wasting your free trial subscription on this movie.
Okay.
Yeah, save it for something else.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. But
I mean, I think the main thing with this is just knowing that it's supposed to be a comedy as well. Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder if like you throw that on because of it not being that great.
It reminded me a lot of Scream in that it didn't take itself seriously at all, which to me kind of got in the way of the horror a lot. So,
a couple facts about this, though.
All right.
Is Eli Roth wrote the script while he was working for Howard Stern. So Roth found the time to write the bulk of the script for Cabin Fever when he was hired as a nighttime production assistant to Howard Stern on the movie Private Parts. His job mostly consisted of just waking Stern up in the morning, which is like kind of a cool job.
Yeah.
He said they built Howard in an apartment in Silver Cup Studios, and I stayed outside all night and wrote Cabin Fever.
Huh.
Yeah. Let's see. So multiple studios passed on this movie when it was initially pitched. So a lot of them passed on it. However, after it was done, there was like almost like a little bidding war for it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but after it was a successful showing in 2002 at the Toronto International Film Festival that changed that. The film sparked a bidding war, with Lionsgate ultimately emerging victorious. Roth was paid $3.5 million for the film and promised $12 million in prints and advertising. But yeah, I thought that was kind of crazy. So
that's interesting. So you always think about like what was the budget that the movie was made on, which in this case was like $1.5 million. But if they did an additional $12 million in advertising, that makes the $30 million box office total a little less impressive.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. So the film progresses in light levels, becoming increasingly darker. So the film, partially by design and partially due to circumstance, In some scenes, the film's color correction and underexposed is deliberately darkened, so specifically darker. But when Joey Kern was injured on set, it caused many on-the-fly changes to the shooting schedule. As a result, many of the scenes that take place inside a cabin on the last day, such as Serena Vincent Lake's shaving and sex scene with Ryder Strong, were actually filmed in the middle of the night. The light from the windows is all artificial, which makes it dimmer than genuine sunlight, hence makes the scene darker.
Oh, interesting.
And I assume that's also like figuratively as well. You know, like, it starts off pretty lighthearted and gets pretty dark. But anyway, those are the facts that I watched.
Yeah.
I came up with.
So Eli Roth, who was the guy behind basically all of this movie, had a cameo. He played the character Grim in the movie, who was like a total caricature of an early 2000s bro. Like, I think that sums up his attitude towards the movie really well. Like, he definitely wanted to make it a quirky comedy first and a horror movie second, I think.
Yeah, I definitely see that. His brother also played the bald guy who works at the bowling alley in the story that Ryder Strong is telling.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. So it's kind of a family affair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, all that said, this movie has not aged well. Like, at all.
No.
Like, there's a lot of stuff in it that would not work today, that would never make it on a screen in a movie theater.
Yeah.
And I have two examples. Example number one, the lispy old man from the store dropped a hard N-bomb. And it has really been a long while since I heard a white person say the N-word on a movie. And I was horrified. That was probably the scariest part of the movie for me. I was like, just by hearing that, I feel like I'm going to get in trouble.
Right.
And it was just so casual. And the way that they brought it back and made it into more of like a comedic thing at the end, like, I kind of get, but also I don't think that was a good choice. And I don't think that choice aged well at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can't argue with that, Yeah. It definitely sounded like a hard R in the first one. In the second one, in the follow-up scene where they're trying to not the most politically correct film of all time, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that if he was doing a lot of work with Howard Stern at the time, maybe that kind of gives a little more insight into the overall attitude and style of humor, but still. The other example was this sequence of dialogue that I will repeat as it was said in the movie. Why would you kill squirrels? Because they're gay. Yeah. Don't be such a retard. It's like, God damn. Yeah. I mean, it just, it was so early 2000s bro humor, and it was so, it's crazy to me how different the climate is today, in that you would never say any of that on a movie in 2019. So, yeah. But yeah, back to the lighting and stuff like you were talking about. In the beginning, it was surprisingly bright for a horror movie. It reminded me a lot of Pumpkinhead, where it was almost like that sepia-toned, bright-colored Old West type thing, which really felt kind of weird for a horror movie. Yeah,
I think it definitely started out, the way the movie started out is definitely kind of like what we're talking, early 2000s, Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, like feel to it, where it was like almost kind of fallish, starts off at school. I assumed it was college. Starts off at school and takes off, and it could definitely be a comedy at the beginning, like one of those like a comedy remake, but when they make fun of specific types of movies, like if they were
like scary movie type.
Yeah. I could definitely see that, but it was just definitely a lot brighter initially starting off, and I think when the guy drops the N-bomb, that's when like, okay, this is not going to be normal movie.
Yeah. Just a very weird tone in the setup in the beginning.
Is this your first time watching it?
It is, yeah. Had you seen it?
Oh, yeah. We watched this, back in high school. I remember probably when it first came out on DVD, watching it, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely had not seen it, so this was all new. And, seeing it for the first time, I think there were a lot of parts of it that just really, really stood out as those are not things that would be put in a movie today. And I think that's kind of evidenced, too, by they made
it's in any... that's for a lot of movies pre-2018.
True. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm just saying, so I watched the 2016 remake of this, and it was amazing to me how different it was. And we can talk about that more later, but
okay.
Yeah, just sort of updated for the time, the two of those next to each other really, really captured how differently this movie would have been made even, 10 or 12 years later as opposed to the time that it was. So
yeah.
But yeah, so I mentioned that Eli Roth's character Grimm was kind of a caricature of the early 2000s bros. The whole movie was kind of caricatures to me. Super early on, it telegraphs the roles of all the characters, which were sort of tropes of horror movies. So you had the dumb jock who steals and is obnoxious and you're not supposed to like him. And then there's the sex couple who are obnoxious and self-centered, and so you're not supposed to like them either, and that it's a horror movie, so they're going to have a bad time. And then there's Ryder Strong, who was probably the most expensive actor, and also his girlfriend, who were the more proper and innocent and caring and safe. You're supposed to empathize with them. So you kind of know right away what the formula is going to be as far as who you're supposed to focus on as the movie goes along. And this movie reminded me a lot of both Wrong Turn and Eden Lake, in that it was kind of the supposed to be younger than they actually are couple trying to survive in the woods. And yeah, there were other characters, but you didn't really care about them as much. You just wanted Ryder Strong and his girl to survive because of the way that they were developed. And I don't know, to me it felt like it felt like a lot of it had been done.
Well, I think there's a couple things with this movie. One, I don't think it's supposed to be a mainstream horror. I kind of picked up that it was almost supposed to be a B horror film, that a B movie where it's kind of The Evil Dead. So for me, I think it's supposed to be kind of like The Evil Dead, where where it doesn't have to be politically correct.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be, there can be ridiculous gore in it. I think but it's supposed to be like that. And then for some reason, maybe it was the 12 million they got in advertisement, but it took the turn for it was almost mainstream. Because I remember seeing I remember there being kind of hype about this movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of how gory it was or what, but I think it kind of falls in the line of horror movies that make fun of horror movies, or the specific types of movies where it's almost it can get in the way. And I just think he did it so far where it kind of got into the way, whereas the actual storyline could have been pretty interesting. Just thinking about it.
Well, yeah, no, and I totally agree with you on that front. And I think that it had some really cool ideas. The twist that the killer in this case was a disease was kind of interesting, but then that there were also other dangerous elements too, like the infected dog and the people from the town, and then just the general isolation of being out in the woods while you have this outbreak of the disease and not being able to trust each other and who's infected and who isn't. They kind of combined some interesting elements from different types of horror movies by doing that.
Yeah.
Which I thought was cool, but it's just the movie to me very rarely had any sense of real intensity or danger because there was so much deliberate comedy added to it.
Yeah, and I think it it also had a bunch of frustrating questions that came about too.
Yes.
Where it's so it's like where the actual idea of it is water making you sick, which is like a War of the Worlds kind of thing,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's at the same time it's like, okay, well, the thing that gets me is where I think you're just saying it's comedy to get away with with certain aspects or not having to answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
Why the guy who was infected at the first was walking around asking for help when his family or his cousin or whoever was right there. It's just things like that was just like, wait. And yet again, I remember watching this back in the early 2000s, so I've had a lot of time to think about it after watching it, and I actually own it. But anyway, so it's, which you can always pick apart movies, but I just don't, maybe because of the rough dialogue and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, it just got me thinking more. Like, you got to get my attention, or else I'm gonna be thinking about why don't you do this? Why don't you do that?
Yeah.
Are squirrels all gay?
It's entirely possible.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it had some moments, like the scene with the sick trapper in the woods when the jock guy first comes across him is pretty intense. Like, he looked really creepy, and the music was used in a way that was complementary to the feeling of the scene, and that was intense. But it was just like these moments. It was never a sustained thing throughout the movie. And I guess in contrast to that, you had the scene where the sick guy is coming up to the cabin, and then he tries to steal the car to go get help, I guess. And that whole following scene where somehow they just end up hitting the car with the bat a lot for some reason.
Right,
like,
shooting it.
Like,
with
what?
The gun.
Like, it was such poor fight choreography.
Yeah.
It was just, like, distractingly awkward. And then it immediately transitions to the scene the next morning where it's showing all those, like, quiet close-up shots of the car covered in blood. That was like super intense, like good horror cinematography. So
right.
it was such a mixed feeling throughout the whole movie. It was hard.
Yeah, I think it just left too much for the question. Now, this is also like dissecting the movie. Like, for me, because I remember watching it in the fall. It definitely brings me back to Halloween. Watching terrible horror movies, and it doesn't have to. They don't have to be great. And this could just be a movie where they try not to get you to think about things. And if you're trying to capture, what teenage and early young adult life was in the 90s or early 2000s, it was calling things gay, and the bad dialogue. Like,
fair.
That's just that's the way it is, and I'm definitely glad that that's not the case anymore. But it was
very relevant for the generation it was made for, maybe.
Right. And so, but at the same time as well, it's like I really just wanted to shut the blinders off and just watch it, for what it was. And I found myself actually laughing at a few different scenes. I actually think I found it funnier now than when I was in high school trying to make out with a girl watching the movie. But but it wasn't. It was just like, sometimes you gotta watch the movies that just let you shut it off. But at the same time, it's like, if you're gonna have an idea where flesh-eating bacteria is in the water, I mean, something that's just kind of could possibly happen, but like very intense, like what it does to you, then you gotta at least add a little bit of humor, but don't take it too far. Like, But another horror aspect was when the guy's getting chased, when the jokester, whatever his name was, he's getting chased back to the cabin by the three guys that were in the truck, had a shotgun. That was pretty intense, scene where I think they could have probably made a movie about that town anyway, without having to make it cabin fever.
Well, and I feel like they could have made a movie out of the story that Ryder Strong tells around the campfire about the bowling alley. Yeah. That would have been a better movie than this one. I mean, that was intense. That was some horror. But yeah, and they just, there was such ridiculous stuff mixed in, like Grimm's character and then the cop on the bike. And then, like, when the kid Dennis did his kung fu moves to get close to bite the guy. What?
Cakes. I think like with Grimm, that has to be like a play on characters.
It's got to be him making fun of,
exactly, because he's like, well, I guess I'll take this big bag of marijuana, and they're like, oh no,
he's carrying around his gallon bag of marijuana.
Yeah. But it's definitely it's interesting movie, and it is actually scary to think about, like something like water. Giving you sickness, and I guess just think of Flint, Michigan.
Sure.
But it also answers the question of, like, well, the spring water that's coming at the very end of the movie, where it's the bottled water will make you sick too. But
and again, I mean, this movie was so polarizing for me, because there were scenes that I just hated so much, and then scenes that I thought were like really clever or interesting. And one was, we always talk about how frustrating it is to watch horror movies where people just do the stupid thing, like, oh, I heard a noise in the shed, I should probably go in the shed. Like, no, you shouldn't. Just get out of there. But this one, it was cold as ice to lock their friend in the shed once she got infected.
Well, yeah,
but that was smart.
The room was already infected.
Yeah, but just the idea of, hey, let's not just sit here and catch the same virus. Let's try and actively protect ourselves and do like a logical thing that would help prevent that. That was kind of like, oh, wow, okay, I guess you are allowed to do that in a horror movie. Yeah,
I think it's, if I were in that situation, I would be horrified. I'm a freak when it comes to, germs and stuff. Yeah, I think it comes from dealing with cash. When I was a teller. But I would probably honestly be the jerk of that group that just leaves on his own.
So that to me was a place where it sort of defied the tropes of the horror genre, which I liked. I also like how Ryder Strong found a normal house with electricity and presumably a phone that was in easy walking distance, but then he just didn't tell anyone because he had an awkward peeping Tom experience.
Yeah.
Like, now let's just stay out here and and test our luck.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. Shooting the truck and peeping Tom and
Well, and I feel like his character went from boy next door to like hardened killer survivor in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just such an abrupt about face, because the whole like first part of the movie was trying to make you empathize with him and think of him as the nice guy and the character that you empathized with. And then that definitely was not where he was at as the movie progressed.
Yeah, I think that was also, I think I read where it was one of the reasons why he decided to do the movie was to change up from being on Boy Meets World, like his character there, and trying to go into something
be more hardcore,
serious kind of ish, which
Well, yeah, and then I guess the other part, the ending, where the blonde guy is like in the cabin and he's yelling like, I made it, I did it, I knew I could, I made it. And then he goes out on the porch and gets shot, and that was like a total ripoff of Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah, and that was totally, it had to...
It felt super predictable.
Black comedy, You wanted to see that guy fail because of how big of a jerk he was. And so at least you got that, and then, at the end, the town that was just weird, people seeing it spread from the sheriff, and it's I felt like it kind of made its full circle and answered and kind of closed the story out, and yet they ended up making like 3 sequels and a remake of the movie, so, which, I haven't seen the remake, but we watched the trailer for it last night, and it was like, oh, okay, so this is like almost it looks like from the trailer, it looked like it was almost an exact replica of the original movie as far as like what's going on, and I was like, man, I wonder if they tried to make this a comedy or not.
So I watched the remake that is on Netflix, and so it is definitely a lower budget movie,
right?
But I think it is an exponentially better horror movie.
You watched it after this?
Yes. Okay. And they for that movie, they took out a lot of that humor. It was like a horror movie first, and then they worked in some of the same comedy, like them telling Grimm to leave, and then he's like, oh, well, I guess I'll just go and take this weed with me, and they're like, oh yeah, I mean, you could stay. They kept a few of those types of things, but the overall tone of the movie was so much more even, and it felt a lot more like it didn't have any of that, okay, I watched this and obviously this is an early 2000s teen movie. It was just like, oh, this is a horror movie. And I felt like it was so much better and pulled off, I mean, just start to finish, it felt like a much more consistent work.
Yeah.
And so I really, really enjoyed that a lot more, but it couldn't have existed without the ideas of the original.
And yeah, I guess with Eli being the executive producer on it too. Yeah, I think as far as this movie goes, I could definitely see the horror aspect. Yet again, not very scary of a film. I think it can be. It has the potential to be, but this movie specifically, it wasn't. Now, that being said, I still will watch this again and again because it's tied to my
you got the nostalgia factor.
Yeah. So, just remember watching this with the crew when I was younger. So, so I definitely will watch it again. But if you're watching it for the first time in 2019, probably not gonna be a huge fan of it. Yeah, especially if you're woke.
Word. Yeah, and I actually, this one was the first one that we've watched from this list that really felt like a horror movie to me.
Oh, yeah.
So I rate, as far as like the scary factor, I rated it below Scream. So kind of at the very end of my tier that has movies that were clearly meant to be horror movies and had some decent horror elements, but also had some things that were maybe a little distracting that made it not feel super intense the whole time.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
What about you?
I think I would do it. I would put Scream before this one. I left my list at work.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So I will have to get back to everyone on the next podcast on where I would specifically put this. However, definitely not. I think Scream would be more scarier, and I think our lists were around the same as far as order goes. So I'll just have to give everyone an update next week.
Yeah. But I put this one above like Frankenstein and the Others and M and Blood and Black Lace and all that stuff. So
yeah, right before it gets to like absolutely not scary. So
yeah.
We should also mention how we decided to hold off on doing Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Because Twin Peaks is tied to the TV show.
Yes.
From what I was kind of researching and talked to a few people who had actually seen the movie. It's a prequel, I guess, to the TV show. However, it's like you should probably watch the actual series first. So Daniel and I are going to decide on what we want to do as far as that movie goes. If we eventually just want to bite the bullet and watch it, or go on. So for now, we skipped it just so we can keep the list going and so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, from what we've seen and read, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is a movie that was made very much for fans of the show. And so if you're not someone who has watched the show and is familiar with the characters and sort of the backdrop and everything, the movie does not have anywhere near the effectiveness that it's supposed to. And so it would be kind of unfair to watch it as people that haven't seen the show and try to, appreciate it for what it is.
Right. So another real quick question. So as far as Cabin Fever goes, I think we're good. But I got another question about the list. Do you have anything else about Cabin Fever before I take us off topic again?
No, I'd say watch the Netflix version. I thought that was worth seeing.
Or go back in time and watch it when you're in high school and you'll love it.
Yes, that too.
So out of the list of the movies that we have left, do you have any that you're looking forward to the most? Because initially we were kind of talking about M.
Yeah. Let's see what we have on here. So Freaks, I'm very interested in. That is from 1932, and I've heard some interesting things about it. I've seen it on a lot of lists over time. Oddly enough, Dumplings, I'm very, very intrigued by. And then The Fly from 1986 with Jeff Goldblum. I've always heard reference to it, but I've never actually seen the full movie, and I'm kind of excited to do that. Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Oh, and also Night of the Hunter. I haven't seen that in probably close to 10 years, but I remember really liking it when I saw it before.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for me, I think it's like Audition. I'm looking forward to Martyrs.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's specifically only because we've talked about doing that movie before.
Yeah.
Wolf Creek is another one that we kind of talked about, so I'm excited to watch to see how it is, and then I'm excited to see what your thoughts are on Cannibal Holocaust.
Okay.
So that's my excitement. Movies.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like we are just now starting to get into the part of the list that I'm really intrigued by.
Yeah.
And into a lot of the ones that have like been on my list to watch eventually that I hadn't seen. And I'm glad that we watched Blood and Black Lace and M both, because I can see where a lot of like their influence has come over the years.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to get into some more ones that I feel like are actually going to be scary.
Yeah.
So next week will be The Lords of Salem from 2012. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.